Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Shaila Akhtar, Assistant Professor English. This class is intended for the students of Honours First Year from the course Introduction to Poetry on the topic of On His Blindness, a poem by John Milton. This is John Milton, one of the most beautiful and attractive-eyed person in the world, though he lost his eyesight at the age of 42. Information about life and works of John Milton. John Milton was born on 9 December 1608 at Bread Street, London, England, and he died on 8 November 1674 at Barnhill, London, England. He was an English poet and intellectual, and also was known as a civil servant for the Commonwealth of England. He was best known for the poetic work, the heroic epic Paradise Lost. He used to write in English, Latin, Greek, and Italian. Milton wrote several proposals to retain non-monarchical government. So, as a result, upon the Restoration in May 1616, Milton went into hiding for his life while a warrant was issued for his arrest and his writings were burnt. He re-emerged after a general pardon was issued, but was arrested and briefly imprisoned before influential friends intervened, such as Marvell. He was an MP of that time. And after this, he spent the remaining decades of his life living quietly in London, only retiring at a cottage during the Great Plague of London. During this period, Milton published several minor prose works such as the grammar textbook Art of Logic and the History of Britain. His only explicitly political tracts were the 1672 of True Religion, arguing for toleration, and a translation of a Polish tract advocating an elective monarchy. The poetic style of John Milton is known as Miltonic blank verse. Miltonic blank verse became the standard for writing English epics for centuries following the publication of Paradise Lost. Milton established divine action and divine character in a superior way. Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained are writings on Christian theme. Milton defines his view on Greek tragedy in the preface to the Samson Agonistes. Although Milton was not the first to use blank verse, his use of it was very influential and he became known for his style. When Miltonic verse became popular, Samuel Johnson mocked Milton for inspiring bad blank verse, but he recognized that Milton's verse style was very influential. Poets such as Alexander Pope, whose final incomplete work was intended to be written in the form, and John Keats, who complained that he relied too heavily on Milton, adopted and picked up various aspects of his poetry. Miltonic blank verse became the standard for those attempting to write English epics for centuries following the publication of Paradise Lost and his later poetry. The poet Robert Bruce analyzed his versification in the monograph Milton's Prosody. Here is the poem on his blindness, a sonnet of 14 lines. The sonnet on his blindness is sometimes known as Sonnet 19, or When I Consider How My Light is Spent. It is a sonnet which is believed to have been written before 1764, after the poet John Milton had gone completely blind. The sonnet is written in Petrarchan style, rhyming ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE. This form is also called as an Italian sonnet. It is written in iambic pentameter and it is separated into one octave, the first 8 lines, and one sestet of the remaining 6 lines. Theme of the poem. The theme or the primary focus of this poem is the speaker's inner conflict. He wants to serve God profitably, but his blindness stands as a hindrance to his goal, and the speaker then wonders if God would demand from him the same service of what he would demand to those who could see. And light is one of the most focused subjects in this poem. Not only is his eyesight that is important to him, but also his spiritual light. So, on his blindness centers on Milton's faith as he is losing his sight. The poem expresses the speaker's fear, frustration, and acceptance of his blindness. The poem signals a turn when Milton shifts from fear of punishment to realization, and accepting the love of God is unconditional even if one has a physical disability. This poem begins with the speaker's consideration of how he has spent the years of his life, represented as his light. This light, being a metaphor for life, is also a literal representation of the days of Milton in which he could see. And the second line expands on that, explaining that before even half of the speaker's life had passed, he is forced to live in a world that is dark and wide. Milton went blind at his age of 42. He had the opportunity to use his writing skills, but his talents in the employ of Oliver Cromwell, he had risen to what was more than likely the peak of his possible achievement, the highest position as a writer in England could hope to gain. But he did not know at the time that his greatest works would be written while he was blind, and his talents come into play in the next lines, which are some of the trickiest in the whole piece. The speaker speaks of the talent. This talent is actually Milton's skills with words and love for writing, and it was his entire life. So his livelihood and self-worth depended on it. And this word talent is the most important in understanding these lines. As a biblical scholar, Milton was familiar with the texts of the Bible and chose to reference the parable of talents from Matthew 25. When Milton refers to talent, he is relating the loss of his ability to read and write to the servant in Matthew 25, who buried the money given to him by God in the desert rather than investing it wisely. So it is death to Milton to have his talents hidden beneath the blindness. Now the speaker speaks of his devotion to God, and the speaker wants nothing more than to do right by God and serve Him. At this point, Milton is finishing the sentence that he began at the beginning of the poem with the word when. And he asks, does God require those without light to labor? He wants to know whether, when he is not able to continue his work due to his blindness, will God still require work from him? So Milton continues on invoking personification of passions in the next line. Passions appears as a pacifying force, and the speaker would request God as described above, and passions replies to the speaker's internal question, and the remainder of the poem is that response. So passions explains that God does not need special gifts or works from man, such as Milton's writing, but loves best those who bear his mild yoke. This complicated phrase references a yoke or a wooden frame that used to be placed around the neck and shoulders of plowing animals. This would allow the animals to be directed around the field. So essentially, those who give over their life to God and accept that He is in control of their fate are loved best. That is what God requires, not gift or work. Actually, those who accept God's control are loved best. Now, the poet describes God's kingdom. Here, Passions compares God to a king, saying that his state is kingly, with thousands at his bidding. These people in the state, that is the world, are part of the unlimited resources of the king, that means God. They post or move quickly over land and ocean without pausing for rest. So the poem ends with the answer to the speaker's unasked question that those who are unable to rush over land and ocean, like Milton, also serve God. So, on his blindness, or when I consider how my light is spent, is an exploration of a moral dilemma faced by John Milton and conveyed through his speaker. He was forced to come to terms with his blindness. Milton's speaker is faced with the impossibility of continuing his works which are often considered to be the same as Milton's types of writing, or not serving God due to his blindness. He is unable to continue as he had been, and he asked and receives an answer to his inner query. So, Whatever Milton wants to preach through the speaker or mouthpiece of him is that God doesn't require physical labor, rather, one must do all he can for God, so that if God returns, he will not chide or admonish Milton for not taking advantage of the gifts that God has given him. So this is all for today. We will be together again with another class. So till the next class, stay home, stay safe and get connected. Thank you.